Many people have expressed their dissatisfaction with the current state of affairs in the UK, from the economy to the political landscape. Looking at the news and social media, it does feel like things are not quite as good as they used to be. Take the NHS, the housing crisis, the cost of living crisis, the stagnating UK economy, etc. Whether this is a temporary phase of hardship or something that will last for generations, it's best to protect yourself from its impact. In this video, we'll talk about an arguably extreme move, literally moving out of the UK towards possibly greener pastures. This option won't suit everyone, but for those who are ready to embrace the change and challenge, they might be rewarded with fantastic opportunities. After all, fortune favors the bold. But why are people leaving in the first place? Well, I can think of a few reasons. First is the burden of taxation. Tax is used to raise money to provide public welfare and services. It is essential for providing essential services. However, getting the level of taxation right is crucial to provide a high standard of public services and at the same time not stifle the economy. High taxes can reduce investments as investors find alternative opportunities in other countries, or highly skilled workers move to countries with lower rates. Right now, the tax burden feels a lot higher because of the impact of inflation, whilst the tax bans and personal allowances are frozen. I've done a deeper dive in this video here. But what really makes taxes more painful is if you don't earn enough, then see a big chunk of that income taken away. Let's face it, if you've had a high income, then the impact of taxation on your financial position is less detrimental because you still have a decent amount left over to spend. Now, generally the tax system is progressive, meaning that the more you earn, the more tax you pay. But here's the thing, paying less tax does not mean much when your earnings themselves are low, which brings me to the other point, stagnating wages. For long, wages have stagnated in the UK. This is a graph from the ONS, Office for National Statistics, which shows regular pay, total pay, which includes bonuses, and CPIH, which is a measure of inflation. The pay figures are shown in real terms, meaning adjusted for inflation. The striking pattern seen here is that since 2001, real growth rate in earnings has been quite poor. You can see here that wage initially grew here, then went negative in the aftermath of the global financial crisis of 2008. Some growth resumed, but then inflation went rampant, dragging down real growth rate. We're all familiar with the current cost of living crisis, and some could argue this is transient, as we just came out of a pandemic during which the monetary policy kept interest rates low for far too long. So in a few years' time, we could be back to normal. To be fair, that's true. Historically, the UK inflation has, for the most part, been under control, except during some exceptional periods. That said, looking at this graph from the Bank of England, it's questionable whether the 2% target was really achieved in practice. According to them, inflation is expected to drop down to 2% by early 2025. So let's hope this prediction turns out to be true. So while inflation could be temporary, there's a crisis that's been unfolding over more than a decade: the housing crisis. This is a housing affordability ratio from 1997 to 2022. The ratio represents the average house price sold over the average full-time earnings. In 1998, this ratio was 3.5, meaning that you needed 3.5 times your salary to buy a house. Today, this figure has jumped to 8.3 times the average full-time earnings. The problem is that, generally speaking, today you might get a mortgage of around 4 times your earnings. While 4 times your salary might have worked in 1998, today you would need to get more than twice that, a multiple which really no sensible bank is realistically going to lend you at. Thus, it's next to impossible for someone on an average earnings to own a home. We're not even talking about regional differences here. If you live in the cities, then this ratio can reach double digits. This map highlights these differences. I'll put a link in the description if you want to play with this interactive map. And before you blame it on a specific government, note that since 1997, both Labour and Conservative governments have been in power for an almost equal length of time. So this problem has been happening for decades and no government has successfully tackled this. Lastly, I'll talk about the non-financial factors which are pushing more Brits to leave the UK. Ask anyone who's used the NHS lately and they might tell you how standards have fallen so far below what it used to be, with ridiculous waiting times. I personally didn't get health insurance until a few years ago when I felt I might need faster access to healthcare. I settled for Vitality mostly because of their reward scheme and because you get incentivized to be healthy. Now, I initially thought one possible factor pushing Brits to move away was the crime rate. And here's where the statistics tell a different story. My perception is that crimes are on the rise, at least in London. Hardly a day goes by where you don't hear that someone's been stabbed. I also feel that fraud is on the rise too. However, the statistics tell a completely different story, that crime rates are actually falling. This graph from the ONS shows the historical crime rates and there's clearly a sharp reduction. A breakdown of the crime may help as it shows that while some crimes were on the rise, for example knife crime, most of the other types have been falling. This is in sharp contrast with my perception and personal experience, so I'm not quite sure what to make of it. Perhaps it could be that social media and news are focusing so much on them that it distorts perception. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. When you take everything into consideration, you can understand why Brits are moving abroad. Some expats I personally know speak of better work opportunities, higher incomes, a lower cost of living, feeling safer, being able to afford a house, having a better work-life balance, and better weather, of course. However, these are very specific to which country you move to because that makes all the difference in the world, literally. And that's a topic for another video. If you're an expat, please feel free to share your experience in the comments below. Thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.